My screen is visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So let us start today's session. Welcome learners. Today we are topic we are on block first of MSD 013 social culture system. That's the course. Earlier also we had a discussion on the importance of the culture and society in the context of environment and environment protection. So today's topic is basically on unit 4, that is the relationship between man and environment, and particularly we are discussing that how dystopian the relationship has become. So that is very interesting term which normally we come across, that is the utopian, that is the ideal situation. But however, in today's context, we find that it is something which is dystopian relationship, something which is not so ideal. And what are the causes, what are the consequences, and how we can see this change, what has occurred between our relationships with the nature, surroundings, whatever is with around us, except we, the human beings. How do we perceive the environment? What was the traditional viewpoint with regards to the give and take happening between the nature and human beings, along with the fellow creatures which are also inhabiting the planet as we do? With the changing times, with the so-called development and the processes of industrialization which has taken place, the relationship is not so good. It is not so in synchronization with each other, and therefore we say that all this has been attributed because of the dystopian relationship. So learners, let us begin the session now. I would like to take you first of all towards the historical progress between the relationship, that how we have changed, how we have altered our relationship. Various approaches. If you have been the student of sociology, anthropology, and if you have been into these type of conversation and discourses with regards to human beings at one hand and the surroundings at the other, there have been lot of discussions, lot of debates, and lot of viewpoints raised by the researchers in understanding that how do we take the nature for us. These are some of the approaches which you can see on the screen. So I would like to tell you about the first one, that is the deterministic approach. That was the beginning of the era when we started exploring the nature. We started discovering so many things which were there around, and also we were in a search kind of a thing where we were taking certain things from the nature for our livelihoods, for our sustenance, and also for improving our lives in a better sense. The deterministic approach clearly states that the earth comes first, man is secondary. What does it mean? That because of the earth, because of the planet, we have come into the existence. This approach is also known as the environmental determinism. You must have read about in the study material. This concept is well explained. It says that whatever is there around, it is as good as the other creatures, the other flora and fauna which are inhabiting the planet. So first and foremost, it is the earth, the planet, the different forces, the different systems, the energy flows which are taking place. They take a precedence over the other forms of life which are there on this planet. So in view of this, we can understand this concept in this way, that whatever the changes happening in the physical, chemical, and the biological settings of the environment, they are bound to occur, and human beings have to adjust, human beings have to adapt. And what we are seeing today ourselves, that is the result of our adjustment. How do we adapt to the changing circumstances? So this, if you take this view as an example, if you consider this approach, then we are the slaves of the nature. In the simple terms, we can call it as that we are under the whole control of the nature. The disasters taking place, the temperatures are rising, the changes in the wind patterns, everything we have to adjust according to the nature, because the nature or the environment holds a supremacy. It has a control over us, our lives, our personality, our culture, our livelihoods, our way of living, and so many things. However, there has been, always criticisms, there are always debates, and also different approaches are coming. So with the teleological approach takes into account the religious considerations, the faith of the people. And it says that God has created human beings like it has created the other fellow creatures, and there is a kind, means we also have an say in changing the surroundings. We can also alter, we can modify, and it is always possible to do this. So according to this approach, it is everything is at par, like the mountains, the rivers, the other creatures. Similarly, human beings are also on the equal footing. There is nothing kind of a control, command kind of a relationship between different organisms. So just like other systems and other forces are working in the similar way, we are also living in a having our own identity, not in being influenced by the changing environmental conditions. But however, with the possibilistic approach coming and gaining prominence with the advent of agriculture, with the discovery of fire, with the discovery of invention of the wheel which took place, this was an indication of the fact that it is possible, and taking a clue from whatever has happened in the past, the proponents of this approach, they stated that it is possible. It stressed the importance of man's creativity, man's imagination, and also its labor, that because of this it is possible to change the conditions. It is possible so that we can make ourselves, our lives improved, living conditions better with the help of our own intellect. So this it explains that to a certain extent, yes, the nature controls. To a certain extent, yes, our activities are influenced by the environment, but so as to live and to survive, it is always possible, and it is always beneficial also to change those conditions according to our beliefs. With this, taking precedence, you just just have a look at how things have changed. Then came the economic deterministic approach, and it totally changed the concept of the relationship between man and environment. The proponents of this approach strongly put forward that whatever the natural resources we are finding around us, they are for human beings to consume, for our betterment. We can always exploit more, we can always find more, we can always get better means of living. But the economy takes a precedence, and with the rising economy, with the improved economy, it is possible that we make our life more comfortable. That is more important than any other resources and than any other environmental components which are there on this planet. So according to this approach, yes, if the economy is better, if we are thriving well, we can make our lives better. And with that, it is also possible to explore new resources. It is possible that we can change the environmental conditions and we can live accordingly. So there has been, the consequences of several approaches we can find at several places on the same planet. At certain communities, you will find that people, the tribes are under the control of the nature. They worship nature, the different tenets they are worshiping because they believe that the environment is supreme. But at certain places, you will also find that the economy takes a precedence over all other approaches. And therefore, the ecological approach is put forward where there is no distinction between the man or the other creatures, and it states that we are a part. Nothing is separate. There is no give and take. But the only thing is that it is an ecology, there is an ecological balance. And because of this, what is there? That we are just like other components, just like water, soil, the mountains, the rivers, the birds, they are the part of the system. Likewise, we are also part of the system. So we will grow, we will adjust, we will live in harmony as the other living organisms and non-living systems are working. So, this slide or this was just to make you aware that how our relationship has changed. And when you look at the topic, you will come to know that with these approaches, the relationship has become more dystopian. That has that has altered to such an extent, moving from the determinist to the present day ecological approach, which is the utopian condition. I must say that it is utopia where we find that yes, everything is in balance, everything is in order. That actually takes time. Now we need to redefine these relationships. How, just to visualize yourself, for a person who lives in an urban area, there is an indirect influence of the different forces of the nature. However, if you check it on a larger picture, if you take it on a broad canvas, you find that there is a need to redefine the human nature relationships, because there is an influence of physical environment in so much of the things that we do. The physical environment comprising of the physical factors, for example, the different energy sources, and you can say the light, the temperature, the characteristics of the soil, the terrain, the geography, the meteorology. These are the physical influences, and they have an influence on us. Not just the climatic influences. I'm just not saying that yes, it has an effect on the climate change and the global warming and other things taking place, but yes, it has an effect on us. It has an effect on our livelihood, on our physiological characteristics, also on our personality, on our culture, on our development of the civilization. You can take so many examples where you will find that how the physical entities which surround us, they have influenced the formation of the culture at various places. The Indo-Americans are different, the Africans are different, the tribes are different. They are not different because of the place, or they do not know certain things, but they are different, they live differently because of their the conditions which have prevailed over those places over a long period of time. And likewise, there is an influence of social environment. Have we ever taken a thought that why the certain cultures prevail? The previous class we discussed about the culture complex, the cultural traits, the patterns of the culture which are existing, and because of enculturation, we have seen that how cultural values, they get passed on from one generation to another. Always there is a social mobility occurring. But have you ever thought that in any way is it concerned with the environmental conditions? But yes, why do we find that at certain places certain diets are more common? Or tea, for example, as simple as that, we can say that certain places the tea is consumed more rapidly than other places. Or the consumption of the non-vegetarian food, or the consumption or the behavior. Why only consumption of foods, but also the way the people live, the way the people build their houses, the type of festivals they are celebrating. So this is actually the influence of the social environment. And when I'm looking at the relationship between man and the environment, we must also take into account the social aspect of the different things, the different phenomena which are occurring in our surroundings. So society is an integral part of our whatever we are doing, our behaviors, our traditions, our cultures, our languages, our way of living. So there is always a kind of a social dilemma that also we will discuss, that how social dilemma occurs when, because of certain changes in the environment, the communities need to change their way of life, and that becomes a hindrance also in the development of the civilization. And very interesting and very most noticeable thing is that the climate and the temperament of the race, because here we are discussing more about the social aspect, because the course itself is about the socio-cultural system. Have you ever noticed, or have you ever read somewhere, does climate, the weather conditions, have an influence on the temperament of a race or the communities? Do you observe any change in the behavior of the people between those who are living in the colder countries and those who are living in the hotter countries or a milder climate? Because the studies on the personality traits which have been done, they give so many examples where the people who live in the milder climate have a more kind of an adjusting type of a nature. They are emotionally balanced as compared to the people who are living in the hotter climates. However, there is no generalization of this fact, but at several places, because why, you must have heard about the Köppen system of classification. If it is not, you may go through the study material and read that system. Koppen system of classification, wherein the climatic conditions have been classified according to the regions. When I intersect and explore more about the culture of those places and the personality traits of the people, we find starking differences happening because of the changes in the maybe the temperature changes, or maybe the rainfalls occurring at certain places. Even physique, you can say the body build of the people who live in the hilly areas, they have long legs and they are taller. In the colder regions also, it is believed that the people are taller as compared to the um, populations who are living in the hotter climates. So this is just an example to tell you that yes, climate and the culture, the personality, the behavior, the emotional well-being also is influenced by the changing climatic conditions. And why only climatic conditions? The other tenets of the physical environment, for example, the terrain, the geography, the temperature conditions, every aspect is one way or the other related to the people's behavior, the people's appearance. And you, when it happens on a generation level, when it continues like this for a long period of time, we find a characteristic feature of the communities, and then we study the communities on that aspect, but we forget to take into account the influence of the culture which has been at those places. And culture also, because in our previous class we were discussing that how cultural social change and etc., when you study, you see that what makes it different, how the culture becomes different at different places. It is because of the changes which are persisting in the outside environment. So that also constitutes something which is very important. And and you find that in the communities who are living deep inside the forest, or the communities which are present in the coastal areas, of course we agree that their the houses are different, their eating habits are different. But if you notice closely, you will also find that there's also a difference in their attitudes. There's also a difference in the way of thinking. The places which are more prone to disasters, for example, they do not have any tendency of any kind of a planning or any kind of a forward looking kind of a thing. The people who live in the plains have more a different kind of attitude as compared to the people who are living in such ecologically fragile zones. There's more to be studied in these subjects, but yes, it is a proven fact that climate, temperature, physical factors do influence not only the livelihoods, agriculture, and other factors, but also on our emotional and mental well-being. So at this juncture, we find that there is an interrelatedness. And yes, you all agree, you are the students of sustainability science, and from day one, you agree to this interrelatedness, which agrees between this thing. When you look at this figure, what you can see is that there is some a percentage or some amount of the bearable conditions happening between the social and the environmental sectors. Something is viable, something is equitable between the social and the economic constraints, where we think that yes, the margin, the maximization of the profits has to be equitably distributed. But at the cornerstone, the most important, the central idea behind all this interrelatedness is sustainability, or the sustainable living conditions. So if whether it is environmental disturbances, or whether it is a kind of a social imbalances happening in the society, it does affect the whole system to a more or larger extent. So you must agree to this point, and you must remember that even in our anthropological studies, and when we consider the social and the cultural systems, this holds true for in that context also. So the extremes of behavior, I may be exaggerating at this level, but yes, you must think about the extremes of the behavioral conditions and the societal changes which we are observing today, maybe because of the disturbances or the shifting away of the environment and the economic circles which are depicted away. Don't you agree to this point that the kind of society we are seeing today, the kind of anger, the kind of frustration we are seeing today, may in some way or the other, directly or indirectly, has some resonance with what is happening to our economy and also to our environment. More needs to be researched, more needs to be talked and discussed about these issues also, which we hardly do. How do we perceive the environment today? See, Francis Bacon once said that knowledge is control. Very, very beautifully, I put it in the context of the environment. Just think about the days when we were following the environmental determinism. And we said, we believed at that time that as environment determines all our actions. But in the words of Francis Bacon, knowledge is control. That means when I have the knowledge of how to control these floods, when I have the knowledge of whatever is there beneath the earth crust, how is it possible to develop some kind of a living conditions in the space? So when I have that knowledge, so we perceive the environment today in the form of that, as I know the nature, I know the secrets of the nature, I know what I can get from the forest, what I can get from the soil, and now I can easily control it. So this has been the main point which is responsible for what is happening today, because out of curiosity, out of our learning passion, we discovered so many things which are there in the nature. When I know whatever is there in the nature, we try to control it. When we study something, we study the different types of the climate, we study different types of terrain, we study different types of hills and different types of other ecological and ecosystems. When we study, what is our objective at the end of the day as a human species is to control. When we explore space, we always look for the opportunities at how we can explore for our own benefit. When we go deep dive into the oceans, what is our objective? We are not going out of curiosity to see that what are the creatures which are living beneath the forest, but we want to control it, what we can obtain, what resources are there for our consumption. And that is the main thing which has changed. This is the our perception has changed. Our perception of the environment and the resources of the environment is to a larger extent responsible for what we are seeing today. So it explains that how we were a hunting, a food gathering society. We ate whatever raw material was there around. We used to consume that. It was not cooked. It was there in the whatever the form it was available, whether it is the roots or the fruit or the flower or any damn plant. All these type of things which are present in the nature, we used to eat it. Then we moved on to the agriculture, then the industrial, and now the post-industrial era. We can see that how our relationship and how our this thing has changed. With every passing stage and the form of the society, you will find that environment has become more of a commodity which has to be in our control, so that we can predict rains, we can predict the disasters, we can know the types and the features of the soil. So this has changed, and now from this era you can see it is causing, I must say that there are unintended consequences. The whatever was done actually was not so because so as to do this to the environment. Our objective is not to harm, but then there are unintended consequences in the form of new challenges and uncertain actions. Don't you think so that COVID-19 pandemic was a new challenge? Onset of zoonotic diseases is a new challenge. Variability and unpredictable rainfall is a new challenge, and uncertain actions. Why do I say uncertain actions? Because many a times we do not have any roadmap. We do not have any clear-cut solution to the issues which we are facing today. So because of this, what is happening is that we are confronted with not only the environmental, but also the social problems which we are facing today. These new challenges without any guided actions are leading to so many types of issues that we are facing. And another important thing is that there is always a state of denial to many problems, because we do not recognize, because this has always been considered, like we have never considered ourselves as the part and parcel of any kind of the environmental damage which has occurred. So there is a kind of a denial. We disagree. We disagree due to the climate change phenomena. We consider that it that doesn't happen. It will never happen. It does. Nature takes care of itself. But today it is here. The consequences are here. We are witnessing from not only the shifts in the climate or the rainfall, but also we are seeing the extreme weather conditions. We are having disasters very frequently. We are having the diseases which are coming up very frequently. So this also is is an unintended consequence, because there is a state of denial, and there is a search for easy and quick fix solution, and mismanaged development plans constitutes one of the most important factor which disturbs the relationship between the human beings and the environment. Because when we started our exploration, we were on search for getting something for our benefit, but with time and again we have been doing this, and we have um, changed the ecologically fragile ecosystems, and beyond their regeneration capacity, the damage which we have done is causing the all the development plans which we have made, it has come to a standstill, because again we are asking questions whether it is feasible or not. So whether it is at that, you can see the experiments we have done with the agricultural sector. At times we were so much positive, we were so much enthusiastic to use those chemicals into the fields so as to improve the agriculture. We became food sufficient. At the time of independence, we were just getting food from outside, but today we are so much self-dependent. But it has occurred at the cost of what? It has occurred at the cost of our precious soil and also our important resources. So that doesn't suit. At one times we develop certain things, and then again we are on back to square one, where we do not know that what has to be the proper way. So the need today is to, when you explore this relationship, again, I'll go back to that slide where we have to think carefully about which approach, whether it is the economically destructive approach or it is the ecological approach. The interdisciplinary perspective between the man and the environment needs to be well recognized, because the nature society interaction cannot be one way. It cannot be in such way where we are taking the resources out of the nature. And society also, it is made up of, because in our previous class we studied the different forms of the society. There are agricultural societies, there are industrial societies, there are association societies, there are communal societies. Different types of societies exist in any region to satisfy the needs of the different, because these societies depend on different means of livelihood for living, for survival, for their own sustenance, and they exploit the nature also in very different ways. So there cannot be a one straight line, one straight dialogue between the nature and the society, because it also takes into different kinds of examples, different kinds of mottos are there. And through the process of enculturation, when we are learning and we are moving from one phase to another of our development, not only the characteristics of the nature change, but also the society which is ingrained in it. Because in the last time I said that it is like a hardware and software. Your hardware is just the society, but the culture which is ingrained in it, that is your software. And that also changes. Our beliefs change with what changes we are seeing outside. And therefore, understanding of the ecological limits in your course too, you must have studied about the limits of the ecology between the footprints that you have and economic boundaries that needs to be recognized. And there are fragile ecosystems. They are very sensitive. They do not have much regenerative capacity. They cannot be obtained if we have destructed them. And the resources which they are providing may not be always tangible, but also there are intangible benefits which is not possible to recover again. So, and the societies also, again and again, I'm taking back to the concept of the society and culture, because once the culture, the language, the folk lore of the region is lost, it is very difficult to regain them. There may be plantations, There may be setting up the similar ecological zones at different places, but it is altogether different and difficult also and impossible to regain that social and the cultural heritage which once existed at that place. So interdisciplinarity between the different aspects of the interactions happening between the human beings and the environment must be restored. And there is changing cultural perception towards environment, because if you think about the problems, I will call it a problem, because whenever we say about environment, most of the people look at it in the form of problem. There is a problem of diversity loss, there's a problem of pollution, there's a problem of plastic, so many types of problems. But don't you think so that environmental problems are behavioral problems? How we treat the resources, how do we exploit the resources, how do we throw our waste, how do we live, how do we commute, how do we practice agriculture, how do we build our cities, how do we urbanize, it is all our behaviors. So environmental behavior are also, you can say, there are the cultural problems. How does a culture develop? Culture develops by way of practicing the same habit over and over again. At some societies, there is a culture of use and throw. But in certain societies, certain cultures, they have a tradition of using the things again and again. This is just to give you an example. Okay, so that is why we can say that these problems are also cultural problems, because with changing times and with social mobility happening across the communities, the environmental problems are also becoming a sort of the cultural problems, because there's a change in the cultural perception towards the environment. Because I was mentioning about the social dilemma at some point of time. So there may be personal interest, there may be a collective interest towards exploiting any subpart of the environment, anything of the nature. So when you think about addressing any environmental issue, it also requires a change in the cultural perception of the communities. Now, this type of linkages has hardly been done over here. You look around the cultures of the different societies which are living there, and you will find there's a difference between how people, as simple as that, eat their food, how they store their grains, how do they practice agriculture, how do they commute from one place to another, how do they dress up also. That also shows the culture. And why there is a difference between the urban, in the broadly you can say there's a difference between the urban and the rural culture. Okay, leave aside the communities. And now we are used to we are used to live, because living in the urban areas, we tend to behave in a certain set standards, maybe because of some constraints, but we live like this. Similarly, in the rural areas, you find that people live like a certain ways. That becomes a culture of a place, that becomes the tradition of that place. Now, if you want to address any issue, maybe related to any particular environmental, for example, water conservation. So we are used to get the bottles, drinking water which are available. We are used to purchase it. We are used to use it. We are used to throw it. That is our culture which we have seen here. But at those places where there is no availability, people tend to conserve those water resources. People tend to use water judiciously, and that becomes their culture. However, it is a cultural shock when that person moves from that place to this place. It is altogether a cultural shock to that person. So, and you all must agree actually that solving environmental problems is a cultural perception change, because these are all behavioral problems. Whether it is mining, whether it is your industries, it is your behavior. Whether it is an individual behavior or a collective behavior, that is altogether a different thing. But it is the behavior which has been practiced that requires a change in the culture. So the new normal, when we started with our discussion, it was I was started with saying that yes, we were under the control of the nature. Today, the phenomena is environmental generation amnesia. Learners, you must remember this term. This is the new normal. What is this new normal? For us, the new normal is any time of the year it can rain. Yes, this is a new normal. We have to wear the mask at all times. It is the new normal. Don't you think so that with every generation which is coming, the changed state of the environment, the polluted air becomes the new normal, that the degraded condition which once existed, that is the new or the normal experience. And with that you can say, don't just think about it, that it was normal to drink from taps, it was normal to drink water from the rivers which were flowing. Then came that yes, we were using RO waters because this is the new normal. We cannot imagine drinking water from any outside. In the times to come, you may find some other normal pattern of purchasing and using water. Similarly, I was giving you the example of mask. The coming generation maybe, maybe used to, it's very normal for them to wear mask because, and that was at all, not at all existing before the generations which were before us. So environmental generation amnesia means that with every ensuing generation, and it explains the amount of environmental degradation which has taken place. So the amount of environmental disturbances, distractions, degradation increases, and with that degraded conditions, it becomes a new normal. And we become used to these what is happening all around. We are used to now today that yes, if the temperatures are very high, yes, it is like this. So this is a new normal, and it controls, it goes beyond, because then there is a kind of a thing, yes, the degraded state increases. And current trends, like which is population, habitation, the consumption of the wealth, they are likely to persist in the times to come also. They further pave the way for sustainability initiatives because there are threats coming from multiple sources. We do not have only the environment or the ecological threats today, but also we have the interactive stresses which are driven by so many human activities. The stakeholders are many, the roles of different agencies are there, and therefore we need a, a different kind of an approach. So this is just to give you an example that as of now, what we think that yes, unsustainable development is the problem. We are not developing in a proper sense. If we are trying to meet one end and then we are finding difficulty in meeting the other end. So what we need a transition. What is the opportunity which lies today before us is that the transition towards the endeavors which are sustainable, the actions which we are taking need to be sustainable, and for that we need to harness science, technology, research has to be in proper place for sustainability transition. So we have to live. I just would like to finish it off here with this, that we have to better understand our relationship. This is a framework, pressure, state, and response framework. This is important for you. You must keep in mind if you want to understand, because no relationship works synchronously unless and until we calculate our impact. So pressure comes from several human activities, whether it is transport, whether it is industries, whether it is agriculture, and so many types of development activities. Because of these pressures, and population also, I was put it at the increase in population, affluence of the people, that is a human activity. It has an impact on the state, and state of the environment, state of the air, state of water, resources, other living resources which are there on this planet. And with this changed state, I must say, with this polluted, degraded state of the different elements of the nature, there is a response, and the desired response from different economic and environment agents. They may be the government bodies, they may be the non-government organizations, the authorities, the administrators, even at the level of the individual and the communities. We may say that it is at our level also. So then there are decisions in the action. So this framework explains that how we have to live within our environmental limits. What are our limits of the environment, the limits of the economy, and limits of our behavior also. So the way forward is that we need change minds, we need to think differently. We do not need to copy from elsewhere. We need different ways of imagination. We need different local solutions to our problems. And we also need to think, design our cities differently. We need warriors. There are environmental warriors, lot of warriors today who teach, preach, but do not practice. So we need real warriors, maybe from the grassroots level, we can see. We also have to need to recognize the interrelatedness which is there between the different factors which we're seeing, and also we need to increase the handprint and decrease the footprint. You all know about the ecological footprint, that what resources are we consuming, but we also need to talk about the handprint. Handprint means what actions we have taken. Increase your handprint and decrease your footprint. That is the only mantra to revive our relationships with the nature, and to nurture that relationships, because so that it is beneficial in both the ways. So with this, would like to discuss more with you.